Right, let's get more on this now. We're joined by Ali Abunimah from Chicago. He's the co-founder of the online publication Electronic Intifada. Mr. Abunimah, always a pleasure to have you with us on Al Jazeera. So how are you viewing this vote at the General Assembly? Is it a defeat for the US and Israel, or not really, given they will go ahead with this move despite most countries being against it?
It was a massive defeat for President Donald Trump's Israel First policy. Remember, this is the American president, but he staked, this is the America First president, but he staked his reputation and his prestige on putting Israel first at the UN. And it backfired massively because really the United States and Israel stood completely alone, although 9 countries altogether voted with them. Let's remember that, 3 of those countries, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and Palau, are U.S. colonies, entirely dependent on U.S. funding. Nauru is a very tiny island of 11,000 people that mostly makes its money from money laundering and selling its political positions to the highest bidder. And then you have Guatemala and the Honduras governments, which are both backed by the United States. So they stood alone. It was a huge rebuff and repudiation, despite the bullying and threats from Donald Trump and his ambassador, Nikki Haley.
And they do look somewhat isolated on this issue, very isolated on this issue, in fact. But is condemnation, do you think, more condemnation in the form of UN resolutions, it has not been enough to stop them from continuing to break international law? So apart from condemning, what actions, can or should the UN take? And really, can they take? Would the US on the Security Council, would that veto?
Yes, well, this could be a real watershed moment, because what we saw was countries, many countries, finally having the courage to stand up and openly defy blatant threats from the United States. We had the government of Botswana, which is not a rich or powerful country, standing up and saying, do your worst. We're not going to sell our sovereignty. If you cut off aid and assistance, that's fine, because we are going to take a stand. So I think this could be a watershed moment if countries are willing to go beyond statements and resolutions and actually start to do what it takes to implement international law, which is to impose a cost on Israel through sanctions and similar measures. Just as the South African, the ANC, has just voted to downgrade South Africa's diplomatic relations with Israel, that should be a starting point that other countries should follow. We really need this to be a watershed moment, going from statements to action.
So you do see some hope then in this often sort of hopeless peace process, at least in recent years?
Well, I'm not talking about the so-called peace process of Donald Trump and the United States. I think where the hope is in the rest of the world taking back its responsibility. Remember, the question of Palestine has been in the UN since 1947, and it should be all the member states of the UN that are involved in bringing justice to Palestine. And if they do that by bringing accountability and not letting the Trump-Netanyahu duo rule the world and rule the United Nations, then there will be hope for peace. But as I say, it has to go from this very strong resolution, which is, which was an important milestone for Palestinians in reaffirming that Israel and the U.S. can't impose their will. It has to go from resolutions to action. And if it just stays where it is with another resolution put on the shelf, I'm afraid there won't be hope. But let's see what happens. Whether this is the watershed, I think it needs to be for peace.
Mr. Abunimah, thank you very much for your time and your analysis on this. We do appreciate it. Ali Abunimah joining us live from Chicago.
Thank you.